Hey, how you doing? I'm Christopher Daniels. I'm here doing a 3-2-1 reflection for Georgia Southwestern College of the master program of the course, fall course 7610. And our reflection that I have for you today is the article, which is our article 2, which is teacher preparation of the differentiated instruction in the standard based grading. So this is by Mrs. Marissa Williams. And so the three that I want to really start off with when it comes to the reflection, it was an excellent read. I love the article altogether. So the first thing I want to be able to talk about of my top three before I get to my 2-1 would be the systems theory framework, which is the educational practices work as a interconnected parts within a large system, creating emergent characteristics through their uh, interaction rather than function as a separate entities. So, for an example, when the teacher uses assessment data from the standard based grading to be able to create flexible groups of differentiated instruction, the combination creates which it forces a better outcome on that end to be able to, instead of the traditional, or I'm gonna though use the data to do this, or I must traditionally teach them and hope they'll be able to go back. And we think of differentiated instruction as something that has to be it's a part, instead of taking the standard based grading and differentiated instruction and making them like a one entity. We tend to separate those, and we think of differentiating something that we need to add on. For no, when it comes to the theory framework, Marissa wanted to look at them as one whole piece. So that's one of the first things I really had wanted to point out to you when it came to this reflection. I really picked up on that kind of quick because in my school system, that's something that we are currently trying to do. Instead of we come in for like a review and they want to look us to be able to add differentiated instruction because we're taking our standards, we're not differentiate them as a lesson plan. We better come together. So that's the first thing I really want to pull out when it comes to that. So my second thing is the teacher preparation varies by experience. So when it comes to want to be able to add these two entities together, experience does play a big role in this. It plays a real big role. So what I had put down for this one was the teacher perception of combining differentiated instruction with standard based grading depends heavily on their perception, experience, and administrative support. So really, the example that I have led with this one is teachers with 2 to 3 years, mostly um, they kind of struggle. Not necessarily being that they don't have the knowledge or the background or the tactics or the theories or the studies to be able to show and put this differentiated and standard base and put those together, make those work and make the classroom just flow evenly. But it's a little bit hard because you have to be able to have trial and error when it comes to a lot of the implementation is stuff that you need to is fresh to you. So and like one of my bullet points I had put down is those with mostly 5+ years of strong professional development, they view their practices as they go hand in hand. So the standard base grading system when it comes to the differentiated instruction, we have already combined that together. I have been teaching for 10 years. And those in the beginning, I see a lot when I was like, oh, I need to differentiate. What is it differentiation? And how do I be able to include that into my classroom, or include that into my studies, include that into my lesson plan when I'm thinking to be able to have to produce rigor when it comes to the okay 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of questions. I was lost. I was lost a lot. So it's something that you do get with more years of experience, especially if you have a incredible admin team that is looking to be able to develop you professionally in those entities. Makes it a whole lot easier. So that is just my second point. I want to make sure I go through these thoroughly. I gotta get all my points. So my third one is the assessment of inconsistency creating frustration. I struggled big with this on TEKS, especially in my first 2 years because I didn't have a ordinary teaching background to be able to come into this teaching profession where I actually did business and chemistry. So when it came to teaching backgrounds or how to build assessments to be able to produce the data to be able to drive my instruction, I really struggle with that. So my what I have down for the assessment and consistency, which is teacher experience tension when classroom differentiating practices don't align with the standard testing requirements, creating conflict between individual students' need and external accountability measures. So the example that I currently use for this one is teachers provide varied learning supports and multiple assessment attempts in class, but students must take identical state tests without accommodations and creating anything of imbalance. So, with that being said, I didn't understand that we teach a certain way when it came to assessment. So, the data driven assessment of how we need to ask those questions or produce those questions for the state test, but we have to do modification, scaffold. We have to do a lot of things in that to be able to have this information readily for our tiered students. Being that we are in the Title One, I am a Title One school right now. So with that being said, I have to wear many hats when it comes to assessments, and it gets very frustrating, especially in the beginning when I didn't have anything to pull from. This article allows me to be able to sit back and be like, I need to use my data driven, especially if I have the experience. I know for a fact that in the beginning and added my differentiator already in the beginning when it comes to being able to translate over that work. I'm I'm fine with two pistols. So I'm not only just giving you the standard based information and give you the standard based grading, I'm also coming with a differential strategies to be able to implement certain to get that certain rigor level so I can move from that DOK level 2 question to level 3 question to be able to allow my students to be able to critical think. And that's how I get my feedback, knowing that, okay, that also helps drive my grouping as well, which is a really good thing that I find about this article when it comes to just not just placing kids in the traditional groups. You got to have a why when it comes to grouping. So those are my top three things when it comes to. So now I'm gonna slowly move on to my next, which will be the ideas that I would implement in my classroom. So the first thing that I would really want to implement would be the intentional small grouping instruction. I just spoke about that. So what I have for my little tidbit for this, which is a systematic small group rotation where students are grouped by specific mastery levels or individual standards, allowing targeted instructions that addresses gaps while maintaining grade level expectations. And the example that I currently use for this one is creating 3 math groups based on fraction computation mastery levels. Beginning work with concrete and manipulatives, intermediate students using the visual models, and the advanced students using word problems. So what I have noticed about this new state test that comes out with the milestone, they do give you the frameworks on the Georgia frameworks to be able to allow you to see how the most of those questions are being broke down and the information. So if I'm starting with math in the beginning, I have to be able to cultivate and go grab those students who lack that the group setting that they need to be able to push. So sometimes you put the highs with the lows. Without the correct data that you need to pertain to that particular student or that particular classroom that you have, putting highs with lows could create a bigger problem that you really don't want in the classroom. Right? And when it comes to just grasping the information quicker, certain students may get that information quicker from a peer, or in my classroom we do think pair share, and I could be able to say the same information one particular way that allows certain vocabulary words to be able to that I already expect the students to know. If I do have that group member that's like, all right, I see my peers really caught up on just that vocabulary word of to be able to implement that to be able to solve this problem. I can help them real quick solve that problem just because I have grouped those students knowing the ability that this kid is able to reach this kid quicker due to the peer relationship they already have, not student teacher relationship, the peer relationships, which helps a lot when it comes to grouping and instruction. So that was my thing that I really want to implement when it comes to being able to just not just place kids in small groups, to be able to allow almost like a mini teacher in that particular group, that if they do get caught up, they can see how the student is using the vocabulary words to break down the bigger questions to be able to understand what they're trying to get across. So my second thing I want to implement, which will be the the multiple assessment opportunities, And my tidbit that I have for this one is to eliminate eliminate compliance grades and focus on evidence learning through the very assessment opportunities that determine mastery in different ways while maintaining consistent standards. So the example that I use for this one is instead of grading homework for completion, offer students choice between written responses, oral presentations, and project demonstrations to show how understanding on the same learning standard. This is one of the greatest things that I have picked up on just in my years of teaching, to understand that it's best to meet them where they at. And I find it best that not everything needs to be paper pencil. Not everything needs to be on the computer. Not everything needs to be you do your test and you're going to take your test this way. That we're pretty much is the older style of teaching that I really tend to get away from, especially with teaching math and science. I have to be able to model or let kids express themselves in the way that they feel that they can better prove their intellect just through the words of how they express themselves. It could be oral, written, a story. It can be an explanation or something they can build a model. And and I don't think it's really fair to box students into everything on paper pencil 1 through 10. That way, if I have a kid that really can't formulate, because I wasn't really good at formulating just to be able to speak, as you probably see, I'm tripping over some of my words. So, but when it comes to being able to write and be able to everything to flow, it comes out. It's pure. So when it comes out to that, I prefer an oral presentation. I will take an oral presentation. No, no, I would not take an oral presentation. If you give me some time to sit there and formulate my thoughts and be able to write it down and get out what I really want to say, is my mind it flows. And so when it comes to the mobile assessment opportunities, I think that we cannot just box students into just paper pencil. I just say allows, and I also have my paper here. Is it's frustrating to some teachers to hear the kids in the classroom, the hand go up, and I got the answer right. I got the answer right. Then we get to the test and it's blank because we're how they was given the information is more of a lecture style. So being that it becomes a lecture style, and that comes right back to differentiating and instruction. If I know that now to be able to include that different aspect of that instruction, that how I've given it to them in the oral presentation, they should be able to give it back to me as an assessment. That's the second thing, or the two things that I would want to implement. And I also wanted to hit on, I already don't ask for two, but I also wanted to hit on another thing that stuck at me when I was reading the article, which is the standard decomposition of processes, beginning each unit with a breakdown standard and specific measurable learning targets. This is what we have really pushed in the Newton County District. What I come in first is not necessarily just DOK1. It's not the easy level of asking what this is, what that is. Theorize, like be able to ask them questions that require them to be able to think a little bit and make sure it is standard based and standard driven, which comes back to you have to have that experience to be able to provide or be able to. I know a bell ringer that not just a bell ringing icebreaker. I know a bell ringer that gets the class that gets the motor working and be able to have the kids sit there and think. Like I wonder if I could really be able to do that, or how should I be able to approach this question, or can I verbally express myself? It's I just think the standard based process when it comes to creating the rigor, when it comes to actually breaking down information to us, what is the standard asking us to do? Not what do we know to do. What is the standard asking us to do and be able to produce, even if come to evaluate, determine, compare and contrast any of those allows the kids to not just you ask me a question, I spit it right back. It's not an I do. It becomes I do, not become a we do, and how should we do? So that's the breakdown on the second one. And the one thing that I would I would adjust that I'm currently going to adjust tomorrow when I write my lesson plan for the next week is the restructuring of the lesson plan process. I struggled with lesson planning for so long. It's like as the years progress and going to professional development, I understand that lesson planning is not just I get the data, they failed the test, let's see how they failed the test, let's see why they failed the test. That doesn't work anymore. And continuously of the repetitive when it comes to reteaching and reteaching and reteaching. Sometimes repetition is not necessarily a good thing because they heard it the first time, so they're really gonna start to zone out or find something else to do. So the tidbit that I wrote upon this one is begin with standard depositions and student data analysts rather than activities or content coverage. This creates truly responsive instruction based on individual learning needs. And when it comes to lesson planning, I have learned to, man, I do teach a wide variety of students becoming to gifted always the SWD. It allows me to be able not just to start off with just an activity to grab you. I want to start off with the data driven from the last test that I see that not all of our kids necessarily are reading and being able to construct these questions carefully. I want to be able to ask a question that allows them to be able to construct and to be able to analyze and be able to take that information in. The standard is asking me to be able to evaluate the reason why the earth is in the center. We're talking about geocentric or heliocentric, why the sun is there. You got to be able to take those prefixes and suffixes and be able to break those words down. And now we have a whole standard based classroom that we had, and that all just driven from one question. But with that comes planning. Planning really help. It has to happen. It has to happen, and it can't be just simple traditional planning. It has to be differentiated. It has to be differentiated, and that allows me to be able to dabble in different types of things. And my framework that the framework just becomes stronger when it comes to allowing the students to freely to be able to think and not just so much as a teacher just lecturing all the time. So that's one thing that I used to be a real lecturer, just sit in lecture and just hope everything just sticks because that's the traditional way I had to learn. And I noticed that a lot of the kids with the attention span leaving, you have to grab them quick and be able to hold on to everything that they're saying. So the key benefits I find for this one is the benefit all students across all classes, ensuring that instruction is responsible to individual needs rather than assuming about where students should be, creates a cohesive system where assessment, instruction, and grading all tends to work together. Once I have achieved that ability to be able to lesson plan correctly, and my lesson plan is data driven, I have the project based analysis, and all my assessments are given to the students' needs, not just only to a whole group. Actually, better break down to gifted, the regular co-ed kids or SWD kids to be able to everybody to be able to be express themselves on their level of assessment. That's when I feel that I have I'm not happy. That's when I feel that I have gained a sort of accomplishment as a teacher. Then I end up getting the data that I need to be able to create the rigor that I need to be able to get towards the state test. Not only just the standardized testing, but also being able to show the kids that they can do this on any different level, no matter what your level is, and you can be able to break this information down, and that not only just for the classroom, that's just real world when it comes to being able to process, encode, and decode information. So, and the last thing I want to say was um, the teachers in this study who are most successful view that differentiated instruction and standard-based grading as mutually reinforced rather than just competing demands. This perspective would fundamentally change how I approach the daily planning, making it more data driven and student centered while maintaining rigorous academic expectations for all learners. And that is one of my teach goals for this year is to be able to reach and allow my students to be able to present and express themselves through assessments, classroom discussions, and also being able to produce the rigor that we need to be able to stay off that state list. And that is my 3, 2, 1.